Hi, welcome to Success Matters. Success Matters is a podcast series about everyday people sharing what success means to them. Today, I'm joined by Aiste Kalinauskaite, a yoga teacher and therapist who has used yoga and connection to breath to relieve her pain. Aiste, thank you very much for joining me on Success Matters podcast. Let's just start with your name, actually. What's the origins of your name?
Oh, okay. So I come from Lithuania. So that's where my name, Aiste Kalinauskaite, comes from. And we definitely do have, a lot of us have quite long, especially last names. So yeah, I'm not unique in that perspective, but yeah, the name comes from Lithuania.
And is the long name because, one parent's name gets added to another, or is it just they're long?
No, it's just that the sort of the roots of the last name are long already. So the roots of the word, and that's how it ends up with really long ones. And there are then rules which, how the female last names end, how male last names end. So I get extra characters as well as a female. Male names is just ever so slightly shorter, just by a few letters.
Okay. It's kind of like extra points for being female. You get a few extra characters
Exactly.
at the end of your name.
Exactly.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. which makes it even longer. So here you go.
You were saying, as we were preparing for this call, that your day job is catastrophe planning. Could you tell us a little bit more about what sort of things that involves?
So it's catastrophe modeling, and I kind of split my work. Yeah, just it's full. I mean, don't worry, everyone gets it the same thing. It's just as soon as you mention catastrophes, everyone thinks I'm planning them. I do not plan. I do not plan. There is this sort of misconception. No, it's just all about helping insurance companies to make sure they charge their clients, the policyholders correctly, and they don't go bust. So it's about making sure the price is right for whatever catastrophes out there, like earthquakes or hurricanes or floods, depending on where you are in the world.
So you're not planning the next hurricane, you're modeling what could happen if the next hurricane comes along.
Yeah, exactly, and how much that would cost.
Right. We met actually a couple of years ago in a virtual sense. This was during COVID, and we both were part of a online class run by Adam Luther, who's very much into movement, and you're very much into movement because you're into your yoga. How did you discover yoga? What brought you to yoga?
Well, it's actually a sort of pretty long story. Well, in a way, a long story.
We like long stories.
I mean, my sister-in-law was trying to persuade me to try yoga for, I'm not going to kid you, 7 years. I refused because I thought there is absolutely no way yoga is for me. Well, first of all, I'm not flexible. So that's one thing. So there is no way I can do yoga. Plus it's in the beginning, I just had a very weird image about what yoga actually is. And I was just I'm not that. And I just went no, I'm not gonna go into yoga. It's not for me. It's too weird. I'm not interested. So I kind of came up with all sorts of excuses for a very long time. I had some issues with pain, which essentially meant that I was in pain for a lot of the time. And that's when I sort of remembered yoga, and I went into my very first yoga class, and it was absolutely amazing. Well, when I say amazing, I couldn't do pretty much anything in the class. It was I discovered that, I'm not that strong, even though I was going to the gym. Didn't help. Before I started the yoga, it just didn't quite prepare me for yoga. But what really sort of meant that I came back for just at the very end, that sort of quiet period when you lie down in Shavasana, in that restful state, really just relaxing and integrating. That was the first time in a very long time that I had no pain. And for me, that was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So there was no way I could imagine that it could have happened. I never thought of yoga as something that would be quite healing or quite therapeutic. But ever since then, I just came back for more yoga classes, and suddenly, the ratio of being in pain, not being in pain switched. So the periods were increasing, and I'm pretty much now pain-free.
What sort of preconceptions did you have about yoga that were stopping you from going to classes to start with?
Oh, I thought that, you have to be well, first of all, you have to be super flexible, because, all those yoga poses that you see online on the photos, they just give you that impression.
Yes.
That, you have to put your leg all the way around your head and all sorts, and just sitting in a lotus position, with your legs crossed and ankles on the opposite. Yeah, it can be really intimidating to start with. Then I was rejecting it because I wasn't strong enough. So that's why I went to the gym before I started yoga, because I was trying to prepare myself for yoga class. It didn't help. I can tell you, it didn't help. I don't think there is any preparation for an actual yoga that you can do. Then I had these weird sort of thoughts that in order to do yoga, you would need to do some weird rituals or something like that. That's, I think, another thing that sort of stopped me from joining and doing yoga. Whereas, now, since I understand, I think there is a little bit of that aspect out there in the world that you can get sort of these sort of various rituals and so on.
As you say, the thought that you have to be super flexible to even start to do yoga, and potentially some of the, I suppose there are some religious aspects to yoga, right? But given its origins, which maybe don't gel with some people, which I can understand. So you embraced that roughly, 3 or 4 years ago? You embraced yoga?
My yoga started, so 4 years ago I started teaching. So I would have been going to classes probably another 3 or 4 years before that, before I actually decided to take up, to teach yoga. It's kind of it's that once you sort of experience the changes it can bring to one's life, I really wanted to share that with other people.
Is yoga for you both kind of like a physical thing and a mental thing, or is it more physical? Is it more mental? Where would you say the balance is?
My yoga has always been actually primarily the breath. Although I do a lot, and my classes are very varied in terms we go for sometimes for relaxation, sometimes for stronger classes, sometimes a lot of movement, sometimes more like a sort of stretchy class, right? So it's a lot of variety for everyone to experience what they like and don't like as well. I very much encourage everyone to work on likes and dislikes, as that's the aspect that brings, I think, a lot of understanding for a person. But whatever I do, whether that's a very strong sort of physical practice, or it's more working on a mental side of things, as in experiencing a calmer state of mind, all of that is really linked and interweaved with the breath.
Right.
And that's, I think, for me, that's the key. that's why I think we sort of talked a little bit before about the fact that, well, I think I do yoga all the time now. I am breathing, right?
Yes.
So about breathing, getting to know the breath, it's really for me the gateway into your body. It's the gateway into your mind. It works with the, with the nervous system. Yeah, I think that's really, one of the, shall we say, the easier ways to have that little tool that is with you all the time. So why not to use it?
Yeah, absolutely. So your breath is your connection to both your physical and your mental health, in effect, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
states. Okay. That's really interesting, actually. And as we were preparing for this as well, I kind of said to you how I follow some yoga classes online on YouTube primarily, is where I kind of discovered yoga for me about 6 or 7 years ago. And it has really been helpful for me with my own physical capabilities and my flexibility, which, I'm still pretty stiff as a board, but I can certainly do a lot more than I used to be able to do. And that's thanks to just following these yoga what you call a yoga teacher, a yogi? Is that I'm not sure what the right name is for someone who teaches yoga.
Well, I mean, it would be a yoga teacher, but you can call yourself a yogi. If you're practicing yoga, you can call yourself a yogi. The yogi itself is an interesting word because it's primarily for a male practitioner of yoga.
Okay.
That would be a yogi, but it's sort of very much widely accepted to refer to a female practitioner, a yogi. But in fact, the sort of the grammatically or linguistically correct way of saying would be yogini for the female,
yes.
and yogi for a male practitioner of yoga.
Okay, that's a good point.
But I don't mind if someone...
So at what point did you decide to start teaching yoga?
I mean, as I said, I just got so excited that, about this sort of therapeutic aspects. And I wasn't doing anything in particular. It was really just attending the classes. But I think I was getting a lot out of it. And then I sort of dipped my toes into a little training, which was, I think, over 10 Saturdays or something, that kind of deepened a little bit my knowledge about yoga. Because if you go to classes, especially if you go to a yoga class in a gym, right, they're not really covering yoga philosophy, for example. This is not something, you would get a discussion on. A lot of the time, gym classes don't cover breathing at all either. So this is a very different aspect of it. So when I was sort of just dipping my toes into what else is out there and what exactly is yoga, it took me quite a few years to even try to get to grips in answering the question, what is yoga? So you just go into a slightly sort of different world, and then you start to understand that when you're going to a gym, you might just see a small aspect of yoga. And that is primarily that physical aspect of, and often even interpreted, I would say, incorrectly, because there are certain styles of yoga that are very much pushing your body. I don't necessarily agree with that at all. Pushing the body beyond limits. I'm very much on the opposite end, as in learning from the body and gaining the support from your body to really be at your best. And it's not necessarily, and I don't mean be at your best as in, I now will be able to do this particular pose better. It's really not about that. What I mean at being at your best is being at your best in your daily life, being at your best when you are at work, talking to a colleague, when you are coming into a presentation and you are calm and relaxed and there is no friction. When you're talking, with your wife or with your husband, that you have this deeper understanding and deeper connections, and it's not coming from friction and so on. So I think for me that aspect is much more. So it's kind of living yoga rather than just what I practice on the mat. Yes, there is that, but there's a lot more.
Okay, I mean, that is very deep. Would you say that it's kind of aligning or bringing your values to the fore? Is that a way to describe that?
To me, it's what I do on the mat is almost like a little playground, like a sandbox, where you just play around with things, and you do the practice, you do move around, you do breathe, but often things come up when you're on the mat and you're practicing something, and that's a way to sort of to experience that, or experience the difficulty, even the fact that, for example, if you can't do something, if you were to examine what thoughts arise when you can't do something, what's going on in your mind, what's going on in your body, does that create tension somewhere? The particular area that I'm feeling it in, even when you start to examine and unpack these things, then you can actually begin and to take that into your life. You can go even deeper than that, as in, how this shows up elsewhere in your life. Where else do I have a difficulty somewhere? And maybe I'm approaching it in the same way. Maybe I'm trying to hammer through a position that's clearly not suited for me, but I push and push and push. Where does that show up in my life elsewhere, outside of that context of just movement and the physical?
Right.
Maybe it's the mind that I'm pushing as well.
Yes. No, that's such a good point. I was reminded of some of the videos that I've been watching of yoga teachers, and you read the comments, quite often people say that they found that very emotional, or they suddenly found themselves crying midway through, or they felt a release during the yoga session. So that's the kind of thing you're referring to, right?
Yes.
So if I were to come to a face, do you do face-to-face yoga class, or is it all virtual that you do?
So my yoga classes are virtual. The vast majority of my yoga therapy is also virtual online.
So if I were to come to one of your either classes or your therapy sessions, what would typically be involved? What would the session look like?
Oh, okay. So they would be very different, whether it's a class or a yoga therapy session.
Okay. Let's talk about a class first, and then we can talk about
exactly.
Session.
So if you come into a class, we'll probably have a little chat in the beginning, especially if you've never done yoga as well. So that's just to understand where you are. I always do check in with people if they've got any injuries or pains or something that I need to be aware of, because I do tailor my classes. That's the beauty of actually an online live class, because I tailor it to the people who I know are coming, as opposed to like a difference between the live online and just the recording or that's on YouTube. So I know if someone had an ankle injury, I know to exclude perhaps certain movements, and we will focus on a slightly different areas. But it's really, just settling in. We pretty much always settle with the breath to start with, and then it depends what's the plan for that class. It can be a very sort of a lot of movement class. Could be a lot of like standing poses, and then settling down a little bit towards the end for a bit of stretching. And I always leave some time for very nice, relaxing shavasana at the end, to rest. And to me personally, the shavasana is really the time to integrate the whole practice.
Just for someone who's not familiar with the term shavasana, what is Could you explain to people what a Shavasana is?
Oh, absolutely. So Shavasana is really just lying down on your back on the mat with your legs extended, arms extended, wherever it's comfortable, usually closing your eyes if it's comfortable for people. It's not a mandatory thing. I personally love it. I think a lot of people who come into my classes as well love it to close that eye. So you kind of have one sense removed. And for me, that just means, if you don't have one sense, which is your eyes, you can just go deeper inside and just feel and experience a little bit more, I think.
You were going to, I think, talk about what yoga therapy involves.
Yes, so yoga therapy, that's a tricky question. It's very difficult. It's quite difficult to explain what yoga therapy is. It's much easier to actually really experience it.
Okay.
But it is about, the process itself is about using movement, using breath, using yoga philosophy, and to meet their needs, so their well-being, their health, physical, emotional, mental health, sort of using yoga in a very gentle and therapeutic way, so that you are encouraging your body to self-correct, to self-heal, really. It's interactive. It's not like a yoga class where you usually just talk maybe a little bit in the beginning and the end. The whole process of a yoga therapy is that you are talking to a person. So there is a dialogue. There will be, of course, some quiet times as well, for more sort of reflection and going deeper, depending on what we're doing. There could be moments for meditation, for example, or just moments for relaxation. So I wouldn't be, jamming, so what I'm experiencing right now.
As you know, the title of this podcast series is Success Matters. So what does success mean to you?
So success to me means living life on my own terms. That's the simplest way I can describe it, really.
I was going to ask, what sort of terms would that be?
To spend time on the tasks or people that I want to spend time with, as opposed to, so being really intentional with my time, intentional of where I'm spending my energy. So that's my success.
Right. Okay. That's great. Thank you. One of the things I ask my guests to do is to ask a question for my next guest. So the previous guest asked,
what is their favourite non-fiction book and why?
Oh, if it was fiction that was easy, I would have said Harry Potter. I mean, I'm even wearing my Harry Potter robes for this. Oh, Larry Rosenberg. Yeah, and the book is called Breath by Breath.
Why is that your favourite non-fiction
Breath by
book?
Breath. The book itself was talking about breathing meditation, and breath itself it's kind of going to be difficult to explain now. It was the path and the journey in itself, as in the breath was the key as an aspect of meditation, but also into getting into a deeper understanding of yourself. I probably am explaining it very poorly, but I did find it fascinating, and it's all coming from a Buddhist perspective on the meditation, and it's just in itself, I thought that was fascinating. But I think it's just that breath, such a simple thing, but and there are so many ways you can use the breath to get more insights about yourself, and I think that's the most fascinating bit.
Right.
And we all got breath. We all have breath, so.
and we ignore it, right? Because it's happening every every minute to us. So we ignore it, but actually, if you become conscious of it, which may be where the book is going, then you can unlock so much more within you because you're now conscious of the breath. And as you said earlier, the connection between the physical and the mental as well is, it's the key to that, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. So I think that's probably, one of the fascinating books that I've completed recently.
Okay, I'll have to.
And that's non-fiction.
I'll have to order that from Amazon and read it. So do you have a question for my next guest?
Yes, I do. So I'm going to go with sort of the theme of the podcast since it's about success.
Okay.
So the question is, what is one thing that brings you closer to your success that you do daily?
That's a good question.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to seeing what my next guest has as the answer to that.
Yeah, I do know my answer to that question.
What is your answer to that question?
So my answer is intentional rest.
Intentional
That's
rest.
what I do. I plan my breaks throughout the day, and the breaks are varied on what sort of breaks I actually do. But they are really interwoven in my day, and that just brings me more to my success, being more effective in what I do, not being tired all the time, not exhausting myself. And it just helps me to check in with myself and see how I'm actually doing. Maybe I do need to take a bit of a break now.
Right.
Because I am getting tired. Rather than just plowing through tasks mindlessly without noticing how actually I am feeling.
Yes. And oftentimes we plow through things, but without the productivity as a result, because we're just plowing through it. Whereas if we take that little break, then we're much more productive after that, right? So it's kind of a law of diminishing returns. If you don't take the break, your productivity drops off.
Exactly. So I am up for intentional rest.
Yes.
More rest, great. More productivity.
No, that's true. So Aiste, if people want to find out more about your yoga classes or your yoga therapy, where should they go and how should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn under my name or my company's name, Footprint Yoga.
Okay.
Or checking my website, footprintyoga.co.uk.
Well, we're at the top of our time now, so thank you very much for sharing your story and your journey on yoga. And I know you've been suffering with a bit of a cold and a sore throat, so you've soldiered through this, you've powered through it. You deserve a rest now after this. So thank you very much, Aiste, for today.
Thank you so much for in getting me onto the podcast. It's been amazing to be your guest, and thank you so much.
Thank you. You're welcome. If you'd like to find out more about how you can find your success, contact me at info@successmatterscoaching.com. That's info@successmatterscoaching.com.